Yo, what is up guys, your boy IzuKage here with the finale for What If Deku Had Garous abilities. And you may or may not hear it, but your boy got a new mic. Also, I'm building a PC and I'm going to use the second channel, Anime Kage, link in description, for gameplay. So I'm building it sometime next week, and once I do, I'm gonna go live, so don't miss that. But with all that said, let's get right into the what if.
Talk to me next. Look, dirty, big body Benz, I got you. Scope on the gun, get in like a Mac. I can't fuck with these hoes, these bitches. I'm married to this, got niggas attached.
So we left off with Izuku about to face off against Bakugo in the sports festival finals. Izuku wouldn't hold back, he ran at Bakugo at full speed, and Bakugo knew he wouldn't be able to keep up. So he set off a massive explosion in front of him, and while he was waiting for the smoke to clear, Izuku used this time to run behind Bakugo. His enhanced eyesight allowed him to see clearly in the smoke environment, and he ran up behind Bakugo, and before kicking him, he said, "You need to be more aware of your surroundings." But as Izuku's foot was inches away from Bakugo's back, it started to spark, like sparks were coming off of it, and then a massive explosion was set off, sending Izuku flying back. He managed to land on his feet and was confused, like what just happened, but Bakugo had a quirk awakening. His quirk got a boost. Now he can set off explosion from really anywhere on his body. Izuku looked at Bakugo, who was as confused as he was, so he rushed at him again. Izuku dodged all of his explosions, then got in close, uppercutting Bakugo, and he got knocked back. The shock of the explosion on his back from earlier was still hurting his bones. So Izuku knew Bakugo's quirk would be a problem now with his awakening of sorts, so he threw him as hard as he could outside of the ring, but Bakugo used this explosion to save himself. Izuku looked at Bakugo and said, "You're annoying, you know that?" Bakugo became smug and said, "I've always been stronger than you, you weakling." And hearing that word weakling resurfaced some memories of Izuku's childhood, the bullying he had to endure, the death of his father. Izuku said, "Shut up before I make you." Bakugo laughed and said, "Or else what?" Izuku became angry and ran straight to Bakugo, who said, "You're so predictable." And he shot an explosion, then turned around to expect Izuku's rare attack, but nothing. Izuku had ran straight through the explosion and kicked Bakugo in the lower spine, pushing him out of the ring. Midnight raised their hands and said, "Izuku Midoriya, winner!" And the crowd cheered. Everyone was so amazed by the fights today, they were just impressed. So Bakugo was taken to the infirmary where Recovery Girl, she took care of him. And after that, All Might had the medal ceremony. Izuku obviously came first, Bakugo second, and Tokayami third. So just like canon, All Might went, and as he gave each of them their medals, he gave them some advice. Well, for Izuku, he couldn't really say much. Izuku just really needed to work on his approachability. Not every civilian out there thinks of him as a true hero, so that's really all Izuku has to work on. But his power and foresight in battle is almost unmatched. So Izuku walks back to class with his gold medal around his neck, and while he's walking he sees Uraraka, and she's excited and runs up to Izuku congratulating him on the win. Izuku just brushed it off, not being that hard, and Uraraka punched him on the shoulder and said, "Stop being so modest, you did really well out there." Izuku sort of blushed, and Uraraka saw this and her eyes widened in disbelief. Mr. Tough Guy blush? Ain't no way. So she pretends like she saw nothing, and they continue to the changing room where they get into more casual clothes, and once they go to leave the school, they're both going their separate ways. When Izuku turned around and said, "Hey, my mom's probably going to have some celebration since I won. You wanna come over?" And Uraraka without hesitation said yes. So the two agreed to 5 p.m. that evening. Izuku got home and he didn't even have time to say hello before Inko tackled him and lifted him off the ground, something Izuku didn't even know his mom could do. Inko placed him down and said, "You were incredible, Izuku." He scratched the back of his head and said, "Really, you think so?" Now it was like Inko reverted back to a child. She said, "Yeah, you were like whoosh and boom and pew 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 pew." She was just really excited, to say the least, and as expected, she had a whole night of partying planned. And this is when Izuku brought up a girl he asked to, come with them. And Inko is in her head like, a girl. Finally, I thought I was never going to be a grandmother. And she turned to Izuku and said, "Really? Well, I only had 2 tickets for an amusement park, so, she can take mine." And Izuku questioned if she was sure, but Inko said, "Go have a fun time," with a sly smirk. So when it came time, Uraraka arrived and wow. She was wearing a beautiful dress and had a small purse. Izuku's jaw dropped, and Uraraka chuckled and used her hand to close his mouth and said, "Let's go." Eventually, Izuku snapped out of his daze and followed. So that evening, the two had an amazing night really. They went on ride after ride and Uraraka was the one forcing Izuku on the taller rides. You'd think after all his training that it would prepare him, but Izuku has actually never just had fun. He's been strict his whole time, always serious, but when you're like that, you don't get to experience life to the fullest and maybe die with regrets of a better life that you could have had. But let me not get so deep, but Izuku was just having an incredible time with Uraraka, and the two shared an ice cream sundae. They sat by the beach and watched the sunset. Then after they had a pretty fun evening, Izuku walked Uraraka home, and they were both laughing the whole way there, something Izuku was surprised he was even capable of doing. Remember, this is the guy who breaks bones on purpose, the guy who ties his hands and legs together and throws himself into an ocean. So Izuku brought her up to her door and they both wished each other good night, and Uraraka leaned in and gave Izuku a peck on the cheek, cementing that night as really the best night of his life. So the next day at school, we see everyone in class and Aizawa walks in. He gets settled and brings up all the hero agency offers per student, and expectedly Izuku had the highest with 5,000 offers. It could have been higher, but no one can deny the villainous aura Izuku gives off sometimes. Definitely not one of the first people you'd want to see when you're in distress, that's for sure. So after all the announcements, Aizawa gives the students time to think about who they want to intern with. Uraraka walks up to Izuku and asks him, since he has so many offers, it would be kind of hard choosing a hero agency. And well, she was right. Izuku didn't really have anyone in mind, and he was really and truly just gonna go train on his own or something. But Uraraka urged him to choose one or she'll choose for him. And that didn't seem like a bad idea for Izuku, so he didn't mind. He said, "Sure, go ahead." So of course Uraraka chose Gunhead, since that's where she was gonna intern in the first place. So those internships went pretty average. Izuku just spent most of his time chilling with Uraraka since he didn't have much to learn from Gunhead. But Uraraka was a different story. Like canon, she does learn different takedown techniques, and with Izuku there as well, he showed her some of the basic martial arts he's learned. And after 2 weeks they've been at Gunhead, Uraraka is a pretty capable fighter actually. So after this, they start doing their usual hero patrols, and Izuku is in his hero outfit, which if you don't remember is just his martial arts gi, or sort of what you would wear when doing martial arts. And after 3 hours of patrolling, the streets have been pretty silent. Izuku, Uraraka, and Gunhead decided the next day to patrol one city over. Gunhead wants the two to experience a real villain attack, and they're going to Hosu City, known for its petty thieves. So the trio take the train there, and out of nowhere, a Nomu breaks through the roof of the train and reaches in, grabbing Gunhead. It was so quick the two couldn't even try to help him. Izuku acted quickly though and said, "Uraraka, float me." She does, and he grabs onto one of the poles in the train and jumps off it. Now he's basically flying towards the Nomu. Izuku caught up and punched the Nomu, knocking Gunhead out of its hands, and he fell, but at the last minute, Uraraka was there to save him with her quirk. She also released Izuku from her quirk's effect. Now the three were standing on top of the moving train. Izuku looked at Hosu City, and dark, thick smoke clouds were rising from it. They knew something bad was happening. In the city, Nomu were going around destroying buildings and posing a serious threat to human life. Heroes like Kamui Woods and Endeavor were on scene evacuating people and fighting Nomu as they come. Izuku, Uraraka, and Gunhead arrive at Hosu City still atop the train, so they hop down and Izuku tells Uraraka to find someplace safe for Gunhead and meet him at the tallest building, and he pointed to it. So Izuku runs off into the city, and as he's running, he thinks about a conversation he had with Ida the day of the medal ceremony. He realized how standoffish Ida was being, and when he decided to approach him, he overheard him talking about his brother's injury, and the next day Izuku heard about it on the news. At that time, Izuku didn't think too much about it, but the more he does, the more he realizes Ida might possibly want to take revenge. So Izuku kept that in the back of his mind for now, and he ran deeper into the city where he came across different types of Nomu and some hero even, saving people on the way, and those people actually recognized him from the sports festival and were grateful. So Izuku is taking the quickest way around the city, and this is by hopping from building to building. And from atop of one of the buildings, Izuku sees some steam rising, and he was curious, what it was. So he went to check it out, and when he did, he was not expecting what he saw. He looked over the edge and looked down into the alleyway and saw Native and Ida being attacked by Stain. He saw Stain holding one of his swords to Ida's neck, and Izuku, acting quickly, jumps down and kicks Stain into the side of a dumpster. Izuku turns to Ida and says, for a smart student, you're pretty dumb. But Ida wasn't hearing any of it. Izuku didn't really care either, so he throws him over his shoulder, and Stain eventually gets up from the dumpster, and this time he's gotten a good look at Izuku and said, "Wait, you're a villain, why are you helping these heroes?" And Izuku was wearing his hair like how Garous does in the anime. So Izuku ruffles his hair down and looked more like he did in the sports festival, and that's when a light bulb clicked for Stain. He said, "Oh, it's you. I've been meaning to fight you, And Izuku said to Stain, "I'll take you down too, but I don't have time today." With Ida over his shoulder, he grabbed Native by the back of the shirt and jumped off. Stain was just dumbfounded by how little this kid cared. Izuku would go on to take the two to a nearby hospital, and the entire time Ida is telling Izuku to put him down, yada yada yada, even though he's paralyzed. But Izuku really couldn't care less about Ida's injured brother, because when someone is in danger, it's his job to help them. So after his visit to the hospital, he went to meet Uraraka at the planned spot, and for the rest of the night, the two helped out as best they could, actually outperforming some experienced heroes. But soon enough, all the Nomu were captured or defeated, all the while Shigaraki watched in delight. After that night, the police taped off almost the entire city and opened an investigation on the cause of the attacks with the help of higher-ups at the Hero Agency. So to Shigaraki at his hideout. He was sitting down when All For One came on the television screen, and he said, "Did you manage to take down the green-haired boy?" And Shigaraki puts his head down and said, No, master. All For One was visibly angry and he slammed his fist onto his chair. He sighed and said, I give you tens of normal and you still fail? I guess sometimes you have to just do it yourself. And the feed to the TV cuts off. All For One gets up out of his chair and a muddy portal appears in front of him, and he walked through it. And now standing on top of a building, he thinks, now where is All Might's successor? I should mention Izuku is not All Might's successor, he just thinks he is. So Izuku is out with Uraraka actually, and the two are eating at a nice restaurant when an explosion was heard outside. The two quickly got up to check what it was while everyone else in the store was screaming in panic. Izuku started looking around for where it came from, then suddenly he got knocked into the road from behind him like a gust of wind hit him, and Uraraka turned around to see, who it was, and a tall man pointed his hands towards her. Then another gust of wind shot her outside of the store. Izuku got up and turned to face the man, but he was gone. All For One then grabbed Izuku by the head from behind him and slammed him into the ground. And All For One was tired of One For All, these damn successors. He's gonna make sure he gets rid of it this time, and starts stomping out Izuku. The people watching in horror just froze, not knowing what to do. But the flame hero Endeavor arrives and he sends a prominence burn at All For One. He used his wind gust against it to blow it away, and with Izuku lying in a pool of his own blood, All For One turned his attention to the number 2 hero. Endeavor was outmatched to say the least. All For One's quirk served to aid him in the fight, and he had a water quirk from the 2 firefighter heroes that Muscular killed, and that worked as a counter to Endeavor's flames, actually weakening him once he got his whole body soaked. Now Endeavor was basking in his new reign as an ultimate villain. With One For All finally gone, he can now reign supreme. Then from out of nowhere, All For One got punched in the side of the face, deforming it more than All Might's punch did, and it sent him flying into the side of a building. Izuku was now fully in his monstrous state. His senses were heightened and Izuku was ready to kill. All For One got up, but Izuku was like he was teleporting, that's how fast he was moving, appeared behind All For One and used both his hands to slam down onto his head and punched him again. All For One could not react. He didn't expect this from a kid, and now he was at death's doorstep. And Izuku said, "See you in hell," and punched him in the head once more, and it smashed like a watermelon. Izuku was breathing heavily and began to calm down, and the severity of his injuries hit him with a wave of pain and he collapsed as well. Heroes and emergency services came on scene within like a minute, taking Uraraka, Izuku, and Endeavor to the hospital to recover. Luckily, they were all alive, and in the hospital, after three weeks, Izuku regained consciousness, and almost immediately he felt someone jump onto him. Uraraka was waiting the whole time, and Izuku's groans of pain, made Uraraka realize, she shouldn't have jumped the gun. So she got off of him and said, "Finally, Sleeping Beauty's awake." Izuku couldn't not smile, and he said to Uraraka, "I'm just glad to have you." Now, the My Hero story would progress completely differently from what we know it. With All For One gone, Izuku as well as All Might and Endeavor, just some top heroes, would go around and just taking down some of the major villain rings like the Shie Hasaikai and the rest of the LOV, because without All For One they didn't really have much leadership. And eventually you'd see Izuku climb the ranks as a hero and become Japan's new symbol of peace. And that is where I'm going to be leaving this one off. Thank you guys for sticking around to the end of the video. If you liked it, like. If you like my content in general, subscribe. And yeah, I'll see you guys in the next What If.